YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back and the NFL schedules are out just a little bit ago. So I wanted to make a video kind of breaking down my thoughts on the schedule. We'll go team by team, take a look at it. Not exact record predictions or anything like that, but we'll get my thoughts. Record predictions, team by team, will come out a little bit after the draft. Plenty of draft content going on here. So if you haven't seen any of that, please check it out. And we're also going to be live during the NFL draft. 30 minutes before, but live throughout the whole draft there on day one, right here on YouTube. Live pick by pick predictions, analysis, reaction, all kinds of fun stuff. So hopefully you can join us for that. Subscriber goals at 20K. Please help us get there. We just passed 16K. That's great. And the like button, notification button, much appreciated. There's our Twitter in the bottom right. Updates on there. We got NFL draft polls, constantly talking about the draft on there. But yeah, right before we get to the first thing I want to talk about, something I always look for the last few years since, they've been doing the games in England is, there's always big winners and losers with those games because it's either taking away from a home game, obviously, or if you're the away team, basically the winners are the away teams in the international games because they're away from home, but they're not going to somebody's home field advantage, and it doesn't take away from their home schedule. So the Bears, the Panthers, the Bengals, the Texans, and the Chiefs, all big winners in that category. And the Raiders, Buccaneers, Rams, Jags, and Chargers, those 5 teams are losers in that category because they lose a home game, basically. And it counts as a home game as playing in England, London, wherever it might be. It's going to be a good experience, though, obviously. Different fan bases, I guess, joining those teams. So, and some of them get to play in Tottenham's new stadium, which is maybe the nicest stadium in the world, brand new stadium. So that should be pretty cool if anybody's going out there. But let's start. Well, I'm going to go in alphabetical order with some of these teams. Why not? Kind of just breaking it down. I thought, why not? The schedule just came out. Yeah, my plan was to use NFL.com because every single year when these come out, they have a really cool, team by team. You can scroll through it, and I look at it every year just moments after the schedule comes out, and for some reason it's not up. It's a little glitchy right now. Only can look at week 1, so I kind of want to get this out quick, so we're going to have to use ESPN here, but it's got the full schedule with the dates and times, so pretty cool. So the Cardinals, obviously we'll go more in depth in this after the draft when we know who's on their team, but starting it off week 1 against the Lions could be a good game in the afternoon. We saw last year, the Lions started off week 1, didn't have the best start. They played the Jets, so they were not prepared for that game, it looked like right away. A new coach in there, so another year. Now the Cardinals are the ones with the new coaches, but if they get Kyler Murray, I know it's going to be tough for a rookie in his first game, but that's a tough one for the Lions. And obviously we'll get the Lions and kind of break them down, but and I'll kind of break down game 1 for everybody a little more, but it's tough for the Lions. You're the first one that has to game plan for something new really not Kyler Murray, but Kingsbury's offense. You're the first team that you're the ones that are going to be the learning experience, that are going to help everyone else out. So that's actually tough for the Lions. Not that I'm picking the Cardinals, but just something I thought I'd point out. But looking down the schedule, a little harder than you would expect, I guess, off the bat, because even though Cincinnati's not really supposed to be, the best team being away there right after playing Baltimore, Carolina, Seattle's a little tough. Atlanta, I think, will be back. So it's tough to say at this moment. Want to see the draft, but a little harder schedule than you would think at first. But the division's supposed to be pretty good. The Niners, if they're healthy, they're a potential playoff team. The bye week comes week 12, and then the way that finishes after the bye week is rough. Rams, Steelers, Browns, Seahawks, Rams. It's tough. Not really expecting the Cardinals to be a playoff team, but again, we got to get to the draft, and it could be a tough team to game plan against between their coaching staff and who they could have at quarterback going forward. So a little tougher, I guess, for the Cardinals. Looking at their primetime games, we got Thursday against San Francisco. That's at home. They definitely can win that game. And is that it? That looks like it's it there. So yeah, one primetime game. So I guess for the fan base, it depends. It's different for each fan base. My team, I prefer less primetime games. So in this case, if this was my team's schedule, I would like it, but in terms of the primetime games. But yeah, let's go on to the Falcons. Like I said, I think the Falcons could step up this year. They start in Minnesota week 1, and that's a good one because both teams that had disappointing seasons last year, both teams I thought were that were Super Bowl contenders. So that's going to be a real good one, I think, in Minnesota. So yeah, that's big time for the Vikings there. They get the home game in the first week against a pretty even matchup, I think. Then they got Philadelphia, then they got at Indianapolis, then Tennessee. Man, that's a tough schedule. Prime time against Philly too. So the rematch from the first game of the year last year. So that's tough start here. Most of the division games all of the division games seem to be back here. Oh my God, they're all in a row pretty much. Saints, I don't like that. That's weird. They did that a lot last year too, how it was like almost every other game. Like, I don't like that. Saints, Panthers, Bucks, Saints, Panthers, skip a couple, Bucks. I don't like it. But the good thing for the Falcons is after the bye week, I think it's not an easy schedule, but much better in the first half, I think, because mainly what I look at the first half is, I like the Falcons. I think they're a good team. I'm going to go back. I'm going to keep my prediction from last year and say they can be a contender again. We got to see what they do in the draft. But at the same time, look at these first 5 games. Like, I don't see them being 0-5, but if they ended up being 0-5 and looking back at their opponents, you can say they had a tough draw because, it depends on if Tennessee has a healthy quarterback. Again, they're not going to be 0-5, but that's tough. I think everyone understands that point. You got 3 AFC South teams. It's a really good division, and you're away against 2 of them. Philadelphia depends on Wentz is healthy, but most likely it's a tough draw too because week 2 he's going to be healthy. And then Minnesota, I think the difference there is in Minnesota. If it was in Atlanta, you'd be very confident, still confident, but that's a tough first half of the season. So I think they can start off, a little rough, could split these. But then they start picking it up. I really think they can battle the Saints for that division. In terms of roster versus roster, you could argue. I'm not saying making my pick right now, but you can argue that the Falcons have a better roster. So and then the primetime games, yeah, it's the usual ones there: Eagles, Saints. So yeah, not too many of them though. That's interesting because the Falcons, I think, are a popular team and they could definitely be good. Looking at the Ravens. Ravens start the year off at Miami. That could be a good one. We don't know who Miami's quarterback's going to be, but we remember the Fitzmagic, the start of the year last year. So if he's a starting quarterback, that's a little interesting. Lamar Jackson, will he be ready to go right away? Week 1, I say this every year, you can't take away too much from week 1. Some teams just aren't really prepared yet, and that's not a good thing, but it also doesn't really tell you about the rest of the season. Week 1, week 2 kind of applies to that too. But at Miami, the Ravens are a much better team. The Miami Dolphins have some solid defensive players, but that game could go either way. So interesting one there. Yeah, I guess they play a lot of division teams early. They got the Browns, the Steelers, the Bengals right off the bat there. So I guess it depends on the division. I just don't like how they're pretty. You're playing the same team twice within like 3 weeks. I don't like that. It doesn't seem to be happening here. No, because they got the Browns and the Steelers then at the end. So I like this schedule. This makes sense here. And I think it's pretty balanced, It's a hard schedule because there's other good teams. There's really no terrible team in the NFL. Again, we got to get through the draft, but, I think all these teams are good. But I think it's balanced out where, it's not like they have to take on, weeks in a row where it's going to be that they can come out of that. Like we talked about the Falcons, like it's realistic and come out in a 3-game losing streak. I don't think that's going to happen here anywhere. So I do really like the schedule. It makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, not like it's easy, but I just like the schedule. You need some good teams on your schedule, so you don't want to have a cakewalk schedule because you got to be prepared for the playoffs. I think the Texans had, not to point them out, but I am pointing them out, but not to say they weren't a good team. They were a very good team last year, but they went on a streak because they had somewhat of an easy schedule. Nothing's easy, nothing's guaranteed, but it helped them then, did not prepare them for the playoffs in the end of the year when they had to play some good teams. So I like the schedule. Primetime games, the Patriots at home, going to be a good one. At LA, The Jets could turn around. It's a tough prime time, Home could be the factor for New England, but it's tough prime time games there. But I like that schedule. Looking at the Bills, this video might take a while. I'm just realizing that now. Bills play the Jets first game. That's going to be good. Bills-Jets division game. It's hard to split those teams up right now. Which sophomore second-year quarterback is going to be better? That's the question. Two guys that were kind of known as raw need some time to develop, but they've shown signs last year. But it's going to be on the quarterbacks in that game. Which one's, going to turn the ball over more? And that's going to be the loser, really, is what it is. I think two very solid defenses. They still got to finish, what they started in the draft here, so can't wait to see that. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And it's tough to start the first two games both away, but, the Jets and the Giants aren't the best of teams. They could be solid depending on what they do going forward here, but even though they're both away, it's kind of a good thing. Like, once you're through that, and it's possible they're 2-0. I'm not saying they will be, but once you're through that, the rest of the year, mostly home games, obviously, because you're already through the two away games. I actually like that. I was starting to talk about it and say it's not good to start the two away games. In this case, I like it. I actually like it for the Bills. I think it's a good thing there. I like that schedule at the top. Looking at the first 5 games, they could win. They're most likely to be underdogs against the Patriots, Titans. They beat the Titans last year. It's in Tennessee. Again, Tennessee is a weird one. They need a healthy quarterback, but they did get Tannehill as the backup. So, it's realistic they can be 3-0. Not saying that's my prediction, but they're 3-0 off the bat, so that's good. Pretty balanced, I think, schedule. Nothing crazy going on here. Again, we're a losing streak coming in a row. It's all scattered out. I guess pretty tough around this part. Dallas, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and then New England. So, they could be in playoff contention right there until that. So, I guess that does appear there. So I guess tough end, but I do like the way this starts for them. So the start is better. It hurts when a team chokes the end of the season, but there's always teams that are already out of it, and they just have so much pressure on them at the end where the start needs to be better, in my opinion. So I like that schedule for the most part, but at the bottom there, it could be rough. Looking at the Panthers, going against the NFC champion, the Rams, week 1, that's pretty tough. It is in Carolina, but, Cam with the injury, that's just a tough draw. You were wishing that, maybe it was a little easier team, but you never know. Teams go from first to worst to first all the time. So you never know, but I don't like that draw there. It's a tough first half of schedule. You do play the Bucs, who I think will step up this year, but they're not the best of teams. But we'll see what they do in the draft. I keep saying that, but the draft matters big time for me. Impact players coming out every year. But I think that's a pretty tough first 6 games, really, before the bye week. Because even Arizona may be projected to be one of the worst teams in the league, but they can bring a wild card factor, hard to game plan against, like they talked about. Playing them so early in the year and away, that's actually not a good draw, even though it's Arizona. It's a little tough. Prime time against the Buccaneers. They're home in that game, so that's good, but that's week 2. When are we going to see Cam? I expect him ready right away, but at what level of play? So is that really the only prime time there? They got a London game against, is that? They play the Bucs on Thursday night, and they play the Bucs in London? I don't know about that. Can we switch the teams up a little bit? Pretty balanced the rest of the way out, but it's a tough schedule for the Panthers. They got some holes to fill in the draft too, so that's pretty tough. I don't like that they play the Bucs. I know they're not both night games, but I don't like that. I don't know. Sometimes I don't agree with the scheduling here. Flexing should be gone too. There should be no flexing. That changes outcomes, I think, of the season big time. Moving on to the Bears. And the Bears start with the Packers. Why not? In Chicago, that's going to be a good one. Like last year is where it started. That should be a good one. The Packers did a good job in the offseason. Some drama with Aaron Rodgers, though, so we'll see how that'll be. But they have 2 first-round picks. But the Bears could definitely repeat as the best defense. Might be tough without their coach, but they definitely have the talent to repeat as the top defense, so that's going to be interesting. Then 2 away games in a row, but not the toughest competition with Denver and Washington. Not guarantees. The Washington game is prime time. Interesting. Monday night in Washington. So that's going to be interesting, but I think those are definitely winnable games. Home against Minnesota. Depends on which Vikings show up this year. I like those first 5 games for the Bears. They can definitely come out of that 5-0. Most likely they'll lose one here or there, possibly. I'd say, but man, it's tough. They're not guarantees, but I do like the Bears' chances with those first 5. But really, those division games are always the tough ones, especially for the NFC North, Green Bay and Minnesota. But they're home in both of those early on. The Bears got off to a good start last year and then kind of put themselves way ahead in that division, and that kind of sealed it early. So the same thing can happen here. I know it's only 5 games, and they're home against the Saints, home against the Chargers. So 2 very tough teams, but they're fortunate they're home there. In Philly could be tough depending on if Wentz is healthy. Hopefully he stays healthy. In LA last year they were home. And that's, again, it's a revenge game for the Rams because it's prime time. This time they're coming to LA. The Rams struggled in the cold last year, so they get home this time. And then they get the Chiefs. That's going to be an interesting one. Best offense from last year versus best defense. And then in Minnesota once again, last game of the year. So, I mean, tough schedule because they're in the NFC North, really, and they have a first-place schedule. You know, some of these teams in the AFC West, a tough division. That's who the NFC North plays. So, yeah, it's a tough schedule, but that's what you expect from that the winner of that division. So, yeah, we'll see here. I think, I do like that start, but it's kind of scattered. Like, honestly, the Saints, Chargers, and Eagles, first glance, they can really lose all 3 of those, but they're home in 2 of those. Chicago, tough place to play. So I actually like the schedule for the Bears. It's tough, but for being in that division and being, first place, I think it's a fun schedule, really. Bengals are next. They start off good every year and then can't really figure it out, but they get a tough draw early this year. So if they don't start good this year, which is very possible, it could be rough going forward because they seem to. I know they made a coaching change, but yeah, I don't like that it's a rough start. But maybe we'll flip things around. Maybe they have a rough start and then they'll kind of go on and figure it out there. So I guess tough draw at first glance. You do play the AFC East, which is good. That's why the Patriots are successful because they have a great coaches, they have great players, and then the best player of all time. But they also play, one of the easier schedules every year because for some reason the Jets, Bills, and Dolphins have never really had too much success in a long time. So it's good to play the AFC East there for the Bengals. Don't really expect them to be a contender. I don't like how that schedule starts off. To the Browns, everyone's team now. Titans, week 1. That's a tough draw because we were talking about the Titans. Even though it's in Cleveland, I'm not saying the Titans are going to win or anything, but it's a tough draw because the Titans seemed like a pretty good team last year, and Mariota to me is a very good quarterback if healthy. But every time he gets hurt, that's when they lose, and that's when he starts going downhill when he comes back. So it's a tough draw because you expect the Titans to be fully healthy here, and I think they're a playoff team if they're healthy. So I guess that's a tough draw, but they are home. Game could go either way. I think that'll be a good one. I'm actually looking forward to that week 1. It's a pretty good one. And then in New York, then they got the Rams, the Ravens, or away against the Ravens. That's a tough schedule for the Browns here. That's a tough schedule. Before the bye week, that's tough. And a lot of expectations for the Browns. I think I think they're a very good team, especially on paper. I'm a big Baker Mayfield fan. I like this team. I like the defense. But still very young. You got to expect weeks where they have the hiccups. So it's going to be a tough first 6 games, but they definitely could come out of it with a winning record, no doubt. And then right after it, they play away against the Patriots, away against the Browns. I feel like this is a bad draw. This is a very hard schedule. I feel like this is a tough draw. I mean, you got to like the last part, I guess, the Bengals, Cardinals, Ravens, Bengals. They should win 3, if not 4 of those games, so you got to like that. So they just got to, Browns fans, if you do agree with me that the first part is really tough and it's, it's a little scary having a young team, you just got to, have a decent record going to those last 4 games because it's very realistic. They can turn it up kind of like they did last year with those last 4 games. So that is a good ending there. I do prefer starting off good, I'd rather have that, but still, and then, no, I'm not. It's not like I'm saying they're going to lose a bunch of those first games. Tennessee, I think it's a very even matchup. Only reason I say it was a tough draw because you'd rather play Tennessee later than earlier. The Jets, they can definitely win that. The Rams, the Rams are going to be the favorite, but you can't. It's prime time, though. That's a prime time game. They got 2 in a row. What are they doing with this? Monday and Sunday night, some of these schedules. But they're home against Rams prime time. That's a good thing. So they definitely, if they come out of those first 6 games with, even 3-3, I'd say that's a good thing. And looking at their roster, it's definitely possible they can win 5 of those games. They're not going to be 6-0. So, very tough draw, but a lot of upside there as we went over. On to the Cowboys, America's team. Starting with the Giants, why not? Good rival game at home in Washington. Not easy to play on that field, but the Cowboys might be the favorite still, depending on who their quarterback is. I like Case Keenum, though. I like those first 3 games for the Cowboys to come out and win 3. They gave the Saints a battle last year, so even though it's away, pretty good. The Packers, that'll be a good game. I like that matchup a lot. If the Cowboys offense can stay consistent, get rolling, I like the Cowboys in that matchup. Not saying they're going to win the game, but just thinking about the matchup. I like the start. I like the start for the Cowboys. The Saints game is tough, but then before the bye week, I like that schedule. Eagles are always tough, but it's at home. At New England, I like the schedule for the Cowboys. There's some teams that are hard. In Chicago's, that's Thursday night. That's going to be in the cold. That's going to be a tough one. But so there's some tough games here and there. But overall, I like the schedule for them. Primetime Saints, Eagles. Are you kidding me right now? Am I seeing this right? They got Eagles in week 7. They got a bye, and that's primetime. Unless I'm missing something here. Then they got a bye week. Then they got primetime. Then they got primetime. Like, who made the schedule? I know the NFL did, but who was in charge of this? I don't agree with that. So I guess prime times are kind of always up in the air. I guess they're home in 2 of them, so that's actually big time. That's good. So 2 out of 3 they're home. That's actually big time. I just don't, in general of how you make the schedule, I don't like that. Not really for the Cowboys' sake, but I'm glad they have 2 of these out of 3 are home because they do go to Chicago there. So they definitely needed 2 out of those 3 home, but. Weird scheduling, very weird scheduling, but for the most part, I like the schedule for the Cowboys' favor, but it's tough. But every schedule's tough. I don't really think there's, in terms of who they play, I don't think there's a harder one so far, but it's how it's laid out, and that's kind of what I'm critiquing here. And then the Broncos. Joe Flacco, is he the quarterback? Do they draft one? At Raiders, week 1. Prime time, Monday nights. It's going to be good. That's going to be good because the Raiders add a lot of power on offense, and they're at home in week 1 there. The Broncos have the talent on defense. They had the talent last year to be a top-tier defense, and they were not, unfortunately. Now they got Vic Fangio in there, and then they can be a top-tier defense. That's going to be a heck of a game week 1. 2 teams, at first glance, you think they're not so good, but they play in maybe the best division in football, AFC West. And I think they're going to turn it up this year. And then they got the Bears, so it is tough. Man, that's a tough. My eyes are moving down the list here. That is tough. That is tough. At Raiders, it could be a loss. Got to be confident you can win that game. The Bears, depends on if the Bears are the same as last year, which they have the talent to do so. In Green Bay, Jacksonville with Nick Foles, in LA against the Chargers, the Titans, the Chiefs, the Colts, the Browns, the Vikings. Yeah, and the Bills are going to step it up, but literally looking through 11 weeks, this might be the toughest schedule I've seen yet, actually, in my opinion, just how it's laid out through 11 weeks there, because all those games you can win or lose, but all those teams are good. Like the Raiders most likely won't be a playoff team, but they really upgraded. The Bears were the best defense last year, one of the better teams. The Packers, anything's possible at Rodgers. The Jaguars were in the AFC Championship game 2 years ago. They got Nick Foles now. Chargers, maybe the most complete team in football. They're in LA. The Titans, if healthy, is a playoff team. The Chiefs, one of the best teams in football. At the Colts, very dominant last year and young. The Browns, really picked it up at the end of the season. Added Odell Beckham, young, talented. The Vikings 2 years ago, NFC Championship. I mean, it's ridiculous, that schedule. So I feel bad for the Broncos fans there. If you come away, if you get out of those 11 games, that's 10 games, the bye week, and you come away with a decent record, I think you're looking somewhat good, but then you keep looking on. The Bills isn't guaranteed. You got the Chargers again, at the Texans. So far, the Broncos have the hardest schedule. It's rough. That is rough. Man. Was not expecting the Broncos to get a schedule like that. But they got a really good defense. Not a long shot if they have the best defense in football. But going against those teams, it's tough. The Lions, we talked about, it's a rough draw. Playing, you first glance, you want to play the Cardinals because on paper right now, maybe they're the worst team in football. But if you're going to play the Cardinals, if you already know the Cardinals are your opponent, you don't want to play them first. You rather play them. There's some teams you rather play later than earlier to game plan against the secret offense that Patricia's been in the NFL forever, and he's a genius, the defensive side, but it's not the same, so it's going to throw him off a little bit. So it might be tough. The Chargers, some of these schedules are rough. Cardinals, Chargers, Eagles, Chiefs, Packers, Vikings, man. That's rough right there. I think the Lions are a pretty complete team. Could use some things here and there. They have early picks in the draft. That's great. They have a lot of draft picks too. So they really could be looking like a real good team coming out of the draft. And I'm a believer in them with Patricia. But that is a tough draw. Not saying they'll come out of it with a losing record, but it's a tough draw. But then really after week 7, they're home against the Vikings. You actually think they can win that one. After week 6, I think it looks much better. Get to that bye week. That's a good early. It's a tough first few games, 4 games before the bye week, but once you get through that, I kind of like it. Green Bay, Minnesota, those are tough right off the bat. But then you got New York, you got the Raiders. The Lions put up a fight with the Bears last year. The Cowboys, Redskins. So it's not an easy schedule, but you're definitely going to win some of those games. So if they get through those first 4 games, even 2-2, that's actually looking good. Even though they're capable with a good draft of being better than a 2-2 team after the 4 games, it's just a tough draw there. But so far, I think the Broncos, the way it's laid out, and it's very tough. I didn't skip anybody, did I? I can definitely easily do that. Hopefully I don't do that. The Packers, another NFC North team, in Chicago week 1, then home against Minnesota week 2. So I guess that's a tough 2 first games, but both winnable for sure. We'll see if Rodgers gets hurt again in week 1. So if he stays healthy, that actually can change a lot of things. But tough first 2 games. They got the Broncos, the Eagles. Packers will be fun. That's Thursday night. So they play by week 4. They've already played 2 Thursday night games. Pretty strange, but cool, I guess. The Cowboys, the Lions, the Raiders. Yeah, it's a tough schedule, but I think it's pretty balanced out. Actually, now that I'm looking at it more, it's a tough draw because looking at the top teams, really on this schedule, the division games are always, with all 4 of those teams in the NFC North, it's always a battle. It's always a toss-up. So besides that, definitely the 2 teams, even including the NFC North, the best 2 teams here are the Chiefs and the Chargers, and they happen to play them back-to-back and away. We talked about the Bears got a good draw with those 2 teams. That's tough playing those 2 teams, but both home, the Packers are away against both of them and in a row. So not the hardest schedule, but that right there makes it stand out, and it's tough. And then looking at the last 3 games, they play 3 straight NFC North teams, and then 2 of them are away, ending the season. So that's going to be a deciding factor there right at the end. So it's actually a pretty tough schedule there for the Packers. The Texans get a bit of a harder schedule this year. They get at the Saints week 1. Seen the Saints struggle last year against the Buccaneers in week 1. I remember that. The Saints, even week 2, I remember the Saints didn't look the same against the Browns. Then they really started going. So maybe the Saints have a problem starting off early, even though they got 1 win out of the first 2 last year. So the Texans can catch them there. That's Monday night, but it is in New Orleans, so that is a very tough game. Jacksonville in LA against the Chargers. Panthers, definitely harder than last year. That's tough right there at KC and at Indy. That's tough. It's not the hardest schedule out there. It's weird. I don't like this. This is what I was talking about earlier. They play the Titans in week 15, then they play the Titans in week 17. I don't get why. I don't like that at all. They should be split up. I just don't like that. So pretty tough schedule. Not the hardest schedule, but pretty tough. We talked about prime time there, and London game against Jacksonville counts as a home game. Rough. Colt did back-to-back again. They did it again. Back-to-back. Well, I guess it's Thursday and Sunday. I just don't like the ones where it's like Thursday, or Sunday. And what was it? The Cowboys had 3 in a row or something with a bye week in between. I don't get that. To be determined on the time for the Buccaneers. Interesting. So, yeah, definitely tougher than last year, but the Texans were a growing team. Deshaun Watson going to get better with time, big Deshaun Watson guys. So we'll see what they can do. On to the Colts, another division team right there. Start with, it's another rough start. I feel like I'm saying that with a lot of teams. I think that's because the NFL teams really no one's terrible. And there's always even the teams that are at the bottom, it's something with the matchup. The Colts at the LA Chargers, at the Tennessee Titans, pretty rough. The Falcons should be back contending if they're healthy. So those first 3 games, that's rough. That's rough. We saw them get going at the end of last year. And what I'm seeing here is they easily can do that again here. I know it's tough to play in New Orleans down the stretch. I guess in Jacksonville, last game of the year, could be tough. In the middle, though, not that tough of a schedule, I don't think, in the middle. It's just really the first 3, and then even you got before the bye week, actually. Just the whole thing in general before the bye week is pretty rough. But in the middle there, I think that's where they get going. So I would actually not be surprised if the Colts could be under 500 after these first 5 games, maybe like a 2-3, but then they can definitely get going and get back to the playoffs in that stretch there. It could be somewhat similar to last year. So we'll see if that happens. Moving on to the Jags, another AFC South team. Chiefs, Texans, Titans, Broncos. It's tough. All these are tough, but it's not the hardest one here. Nick Foles with the Jags, so we'll see how they do. That'll be pretty cool. Jags, Chiefs, week 1. Nick Foles versus Mahomes, pretty cool. They get the London game against the Texans, and is that the only prime time besides the Titans? Seems like the Jags and the Titans play prime time every year, Thursday night every year, I should say. Just feels like it happens a lot. That one's in Jacksonville, so that's good. I think pretty good draw here. It's tough to play the Chiefs first and then play 2 division rivals after that. But I guess the way it ends at Atlanta against the Colts, not easy. But you definitely nowhere near the hardest schedule here. So pretty good draw for the Jags. They got the Chiefs, one of the better teams in football, but they are switching their defense. Can the offense continue what they were doing? Jags, Raiders. I think this is going to be a good team. This should be a good team, but maybe teams figured them out, Really, it's a matter of pointing out what games I'm looking forward to here. The Colts rematch, that one's at home. I just don't know if that's that significant in Denver. Back-to-back prime times there. That's interesting. Going against the Packers and then the Vikings right after that. Then in Tennessee, prime time against the Chargers. I guess that's the one really that I'm looking forward to, or at Chicago. Tough to be at Chicago in the cold, but we saw the Chiefs look just fine, in the snow against the Colts in the playoffs too. So that'll definitely be a good one. That Packers Chiefs game should be fun too. So we have Packers and Bears, 2 NFC North teams. That'll be a lot of fun. But definitely we expect the Chiefs to be good, but you never know with the NFL these days. Chargers get the Colts first. They get the Lions. Ooh, that might be tough this stretch right here. Pittsburgh, at Tennessee, at Chicago, home against Green Bay. That could be a tough spot, and then finishing in Kansas City. But other than that, there's spots here and there. The primetime games, Steelers, Raiders, Chiefs. They're home on 2 of those. Home on 3, home against the Vikings too. That's a pretty good draw for the Chargers actually. All those primetime games and mostly home. A pretty good draw there. Definitely not an easy schedule, but I just like the draw for them. On to the Rams. The Rams start with at Carolina. That's a very good draw. We talked about that on the Panthers side when we were talking about the Panthers, because Cam Newton, might be, even though he's playing, he won't be 100%. So I think it's a pretty good draw, especially to burn an away game there where you definitely should still win. I like that draw. But then playing the Saints and the Browns, somewhat tough. Home against the Bears this year, we talked about that. At Atlanta, that's a tough one though, kind of going backwards. I actually like the schedule a lot for the Rams. They definitely have the chance to be the best team in the NFC with the schedule. I honestly think that. I think that's a pretty darn good draw the way it laid out. There's some tough ones like I mentioned here and there. Let's look at the prime time. At Cleveland, it could be tough for sure. At Seattle, so I guess first glance it looks like a pretty good. There's good draws here and there. The way it's laid out, it's pretty good. But then looking in depth like that, that's pretty tough. They have their first 2 prime time games are away against two pretty solid teams. And they're home against Chicago. That's not even a guarantee that you're at home. 2 in a row, home against Baltimore. 2 very good defenses there in Chicago and Baltimore, so that's going to be interesting. First glance look like a easier schedule. Good draw here and there, but it's really not the easier schedule, actually. Mainly looking at the primetime games, because 2 aways against 2 solid teams and then 2 really good defenses, the ones you're home against. So you maybe, depending on what type of season it is, we'll see who has the mismatch there. So that's something to look out for. First glance, easy, or not easy, good draw, but then look, those primetime games are key there. So that's an interesting schedule, the Rams. The Dolphins, talked about their first game with the Ravens already. Looking at, Ravens, Patriots, Cowboys, Chargers, that's real tough. Real tough first 4 games. But in terms of the draw, one of them is away, so I guess that's a good thing. But you pretty much have to have a pretty good record after that, because you're going to have a whole bunch of away games coming up. But not really the hardest schedule, going through the rest. So it's a weird one. You would like to come out at least 2-2 in the first 4 games, at least, but it's going to be tough to do because look at the teams you play. So I don't like that start for the Dolphins, but not the hardest schedule going through the rest of it. Prime time, you got the Steelers in Pittsburgh, and that's it. It looks like. Yep. That's not easy playing in Pittsburgh prime time. So. Don't like the beginning. Don't like that one and only prime time game. But could be worse. Could definitely be worse. On to the Vikings. This is my team. Unfortunately. Just right away, you just look for the prime time games because people put too much on Kirk Cousins for the prime time games. I think he has a bad prime time record because the Redskins roster was really never built for the postseason. But the Vikings in general just have had bad luck in prime time over the years. No matter who was on their team, it seemed they lose a lot of prime time games. So, interesting. Something interesting right off the bat is they play the Bears in Week 4 in Chicago at 3:25. I find that a little odd, that it's the late afternoon game. This is Central Time, by the way. So that's a little strange. So the prime time games are Redskins, Cowboys, Seahawks, Chargers, Packers. Too many primetime games. Don't like the NFL for that one. Vikings aren't too good in prime time, but I'm confident, that this roster is built for well into the postseason, even though it didn't even make it there last year. So actually, first glance, the Atlanta game is going to be tough in the first game. Good team. Both teams very similar. Going to try to bounce back, and I think both teams will, or could, I should say. We got to see what they do in the draft. I think the Vikings get a good draw playing them at home in Minnesota there. At Green Bay should be tough, but that's what they got to deal with every year around that part. I actually think, looking at this, looking at the first 7 games leading up to and before any primetime game, they can actually come away with a real good start, I think. A real good start. It's some tough games, but it's something I can see, being a Vikings fan. Just by the way the schedule's laid out, they can come up with a really, really good start, maybe one of the better records in the NFL after the first 7 games, and then look at the rest of them. The Redskins, not the hardest team, but it's prime time. Kirk Cousins versus the Redskins, then at Kansas City, then at Dallas in prime time, then against the Broncos, not the hardest one. Then the bye week at Seattle. They always struggle at Seattle in prime time. Detroit's always a toss-up at LA in prime time. Home against Green Bay, prime time. Home against the Bears. It could be a real good start, and that could be a real rough finish. This team should be in the playoffs. Will they be? Totally different question. I don't like the too many primetime games. I think they can beat Washington in that one. The other ones will be tough. That's for sure. Not saying they'll lose all of them, because even looking back last year, they could have beat Seattle. Why are they playing at Seattle again? But I think that was a Thursday night last year. You could have won. You could have came away with that one. Even the Saints game, if it wasn't for a turnover, you could have came away with that. So they're right there to win those games, but it's just been rough just over several years prime time. So I think they'll start off good, and then I think they must start off good. Really, it's a must. So we'll see. Patriots next, playing in the AFC East. Not going to have the toughest schedule in between, like looking at the draws and how everything is laid out. Pretty good draw there. Playing at Baltimore week 9. I would say it's tough playing at Baltimore than playing at Philly, but there's a bye week in between. They work wonders with the bye week. Very well coached, prepared. maybe one of the easier schedules, but that's maybe because we're thinking about the Patriots when going over. It's primetime games that I'm starting backwards from it. The Steelers, week 1, I guess that can go either way. The Giants, the Jets, the Texans, one of the easier schedules, probably the easiest how it's laid out. So that's interesting. The Saints are next. Texans, Rams, Seahawks, Cowboys. So that's a tough, first 4, I think, because Texans pretty solid team. You got to think the Saints are the favorite, but then you play at LA, then at Seattle. Not easy. Home against the Cowboys. They struggled with them last year. So even though I'm confident with the Saints because they're a very good team, and they have one of the better quarterbacks of all time, I'm confident that they can come away with, looking pretty good, but it's a pretty tough draw, And I guess some rough matchups. They can honestly be 2-2. What if they're 1-3 in that? I think that's realistic, actually, but they're a good team. Then they get at Jacksonville's not easy. They play at Jacksonville and at Chicago. It's a rough one, too. I think down the stretch, it's looking pretty good there, though. I like it. I like the last 4 games for them matchup-wise. Tennessee, we talk about them. You'd rather play them earlier than later. Carolina, Tennessee, you'd rather play later than earlier. Earlier, they'll be healthy quarterback-wise. And then Carolina, the worst spot to play Carolina, I think, would be right in the middle for some reason. Cam trying to get back to his ways there. And then maybe can find that, and then maybe at the end of the year, I'm not saying for sure. I'm a big Cam Newton guy. Coming out of Auburn, I was really high on. Everybody was at the first pick, but I've always been a fan of Cam Newton, even though I'm not a Panthers fan or an Auburn fan. Is basically my point, but it's a realistic chance that something could bother him again. Maybe he can sit out some games. So at Carolina, it's impossible to predict. It's really impossible to predict at this point. What could that be? But the first 4 games are tough. The Jacksonville, Chicago's tough. But other than that, pretty good rest of the way for the Saints to figure it out and get back in a very good spot there. The Giants are next. Giants are a tough one because I don't know what their team's going to look like. They got 2 first-round picks. Who's going to be their quarterback? Very tough. But not a tough draw in the beginning, just at Dallas. I think, definitely Bills. Not saying the Giants are better than the next few teams, Bills, Bucks, Redskins, but those are winnable games. Home against Minnesota, another winnable game. At New England, probably could be a loss. Not a tough schedule, tough first week. Looking at the at the end of it, at Chicago, home against Green Bay, at Philly, and then you'll play Philly in a couple more weeks. I guess that's pretty tough. There's definitely harder schedules out there. Looking at prime time, you got the Patriots, you got the Cowboys, you got the Eagles. So that's pretty tough looking at it that way because you're away 2 of them. And that's the Eagles and the Patriots, Super Bowl champions, and the home ones against the Cowboys, which always goes either way, division rival game. So, first glance, not too bad, but then the primetime games really wasn't a good primetime draw for them, I don't think. Where are we at now? The Jets. All right, let's do the Jets. Bills, Browns, Patriots, Eagles. Yeah, and they got the bye week in between there, but that looks pretty tough there. The AFC East teams I don't expect to have the hardest schedule. So still a young team, still trying to figure it out. We'll see if they do it. People think they can be a surprise team to get in. And they have the schedule to do so, really. There's some hard games here and there, but I like the way it's laid out here. It's just really on Darnold. How much will he grow this year? How much will he improve? The Browns prime time. They're home in that, so that's good draw. Home against New England. You're gonna have to play New England anyways. So I think that's actually a really good draw because you're gonna have to play New England anyways. Prime time games. The home team majority of the time, no matter what the game is, win most of the time. But looking at prime time games, the home team has the even bigger edge than a regular game. So that's actually a good draw. And they're home against the Browns too, and then at Baltimore is gonna be tough. But I think it's a pretty good schedule for the Jets. Definitely a really good schedule. Patriots and the Jets so far I think had the best draws. Same division, so I think it could apply for the rest of the AFC teams that we went over already. But the Raiders, I saw the Broncos, and they had a ridiculously hard schedule, and this is very tough too. Looking at the first 5 games, they could be 0-5. I mean, it's almost the same thing as the Broncos. They could be. I mean, they can definitely beat the Broncos at home in week 1, but then you got the Chiefs, the fight in Minnesota, in Indianapolis, home against Chicago. No, that's in London, actually. So the Bears in a neutral site. I mean, and then they got at Green Bay, at the Texans. That's a very hard schedule. I don't think quite as bad as the way the Broncos laid out, so we get through 8 weeks. It's not quite as bad, but those first 8 weeks are rough, very rough. I think the Broncos was the first 10 weeks. That was very rough. It's not an easy schedule, rough draw. Looking at prime time, minus the London game there. They're home. I mean, yeah, talking about the London game, it takes away a home game, so that's rough. Even though it says verse there, I know they're home in that game. So the Broncos, prime time, they're at home and home against the Chargers. Is that all I'm seeing here? Okay. So I guess a pretty good draw that way, but it's a very tough schedule. Eagles are next. Got to stay healthy. Wentz got to stay healthy. The offensive line's got to stay healthy. They got to draft offensive linemen for the future and a couple for right now, maybe one for starter right now. So we'll see what they do there. That's an important draft, very important for every team, really. Redskins, the Falcons will be a good game. Prime time. Ooh, rough 6, 7, 8 right there. At Minnesota, at Dallas, at Buffalo. And one of those is prime time right in the middle. That's no good. But other than that, not a bad schedule at all. Definitely a lot of winnable games. It's just that 3 right there, 6, 7, 8. Pretty rough. Because that primetime game's in the middle there. Minnesota, and they got to play at Atlanta, at Green Bay. So, I guess the first and then the Bears top off before the bye week. So the first 9 games are actually kind of hard here and there. Not the worst, but it's tough with the 3 away games. But I think they'll finish strong as long as they're healthy. But that actually could be a bad setup that they play some, top defenses. The Bears, the Cowboys, the Vikings. That they play those tough teams. Hopefully they're healthy. They need to be healthy for this stretch. That's just the key there. Got to retool the offensive line in the draft. Steelers. Did we look at the prime time for? Sometimes I'm skipping these prime time. Going back to the Eagles. Apologize. Prime time. We got the Falcons, the Cowboys. Yeah, we kind of looked at them. They were both away though. Home against Seattle. Home against the Giants. Yeah, it's tough out there away, and the first 2 up there too. Steelers are next. At Patriots, it's tough. First 3 games look pretty tough, but they can win 2 of those, but they also can come out with 1 win, maybe none. So it's not the easiest first 3. Looking at, now that we're going on through this, we got basically I start talking about the same things here. The Chargers are going to be a tough team, obviously. That final stretch is good. Good draw for the Steelers. They can definitely win some games down the road there. Looking at the primetime games, you got the Patriots, the Bengals, the Chargers. They're way at 2 out of those 3 so far. The Dolphins, the Browns. So many primetime games. Being away against the Patriots, Chargers, not the best draw, but at that last stretch, I kind of like for them to kind of turn it up if they're healthy, able to do so. The Niners, another team that just has to stay healthy. They could be a pretty good team if they're healthy. Away the first 2 games, but I like it. Those are definitely 2 winnable games. And then after that, you have, mostly home games the rest of the way. So as long as you're not 0-2, I think that looks pretty good, and it's doable to be 2-0. So I like that. At 2 away games in a row. Again, Rams, Redskins, not terrible, but it happens. And 2 away games in a row again with the Ravens and Saints. That's going to be tough. So I kind of like the way it starts, but then 2 away games in a row here and there. Yeah, it's going to be a tough stretch here. Packers, Ravens, Saints, Falcons, Rams, Seahawks. So the end of the schedule is very rough. I like the way it starts. End of the schedule, very, very rough. But doable for the Niners. Browns, they're home, prime time. At Cardinals, that's a good time to, that's a good one for them, I think. Seattle, they're home. I like the primetime games. I like, it's just that ending part is the tough part for the Niners. Looking at the Seahawks, play some tough teams at the top. Nothing we've seen harder. tough stretch here. In Philly, Vikings at LA, at Carolina. If they're healthy, that's a pretty tough stretch. But really nothing. You got tough teams here and there. Nothing crazy. Primetime games, they're home against the Rams. They are at San Fran. They got 3 in a row with the bye week. They got Monday night, bye week, Sunday night, Monday night. What is that? I don't like that. Niners, Eagles, Vikings. That's tough. And then they got the Rams, at Carolina. No, 4 in a row. I'm losing my mind here. That's literally 4 in a row. What? I don't get the scheduling. I can't believe it's 4 in a row. I was done after seeing it was 3. And if I don't understand the scheduling. I don't know if that favors or hurts them. It's just I don't like the scheduling. Honestly, that's tough because 3 of them are away. That's rough. That is bad draw. That's bad by the league. Why? Monday night, Sunday night, Monday night, Sunday night. Mind-blowing stuff. Not a good job by the NFL here. Not the hardest schedule overall, but that part's rough right there. Good thing they got the bye week in there. Man, okay. I don't know what they're doing over there. Buccaneers. Pretty good draw up the top. Then they got their at Rams, at Saints. That's tough. Rams, at Saints, and then right here they're at Tennessee, at Seattle, at Atlanta, at Jacksonville. So they got some tough away runs here and there. Not the hardest schedule, but I like the way it starts before those 2 away games. And prime times, we're looking at the Panthers. That's a good draw there, even though it's in Carolina. We talked about why. Is that it? Yeah. I mean, besides the Rams, Saints, Titans, Seahawks, and that ain't that bad, even though it's 2 away games in a row. Atlanta, Jacksonville. So yeah, some tough spots there, but not a terrible schedule. For this team, primetime Carolina is all they got. Good draw there. 2 more teams. This is a long video. Tennessee with the Browns, talked about that could be a good game there in Cleveland. Could be tough. The Colts at Jags and at Atlanta. We just talked about Tampa Bay played at Atlanta, at Jags at some point, so that's interesting. So I guess that's tough. They get to be home against the Chargers, home against the Chiefs. We talked about this with the Texans schedule. I don't like that they play just Texans and then miss a game, and then skip a game, and then Texans again. I don't like that. But other than that, really, besides just this part right here, I think it's a good schedule for the Titans. Pretty good draw. If they stay healthy, they definitely can get to the playoffs. I like the schedule for them. Looking at prime time at Jacksonville, they always play them on Thursday night. Will be a good game. Is that it? It looks like it's it. So I like this draw for the Titans. Just got to stay healthy. Redskins, and then we're done. At Eagles, home against Cowboys, home against Bears. Tough first 3 games. But you can win some of those. It could be worse because you're home on 2 of those, but it's tough. Home against the Patriots, 2 away games in a row down there. Versus Kirk Cousins, the revenge game for Cousins. Not a bad schedule for the Redskins to me. Not bad at all. I guess just get through those first 3 games. Even 1 and 2, even if it's that, 2 and 1's looking pretty good. Primetime games, the Bears, the Vikings, just 2 NFC North teams. So I guess it's tough to play those 2 teams depending on if the Vikings some of us expect to be there. I guess that's a pretty tough draw playing those 2 teams, but 1 home, 1 away as it should be. Not a bad schedule for the Redskins there. So that's going to do it. Making sure I didn't miss any teams because that gets a little confusing the way that's like that. But, yeah, I better wrap this up. That's a long video. I kind of said why not with this video. I'm excited for the scheduling. So just break it down again. We'll have record predictions team by team. Maybe a week or 2 after the draft. After the draft, we want to get to winners, losers, grades, all that kind of stuff. So please join us live during the draft. We have plenty draft content on the channel and more to come leading up to the draft and through the draft. And like I said, after even too. So, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.